Linux is a new sponsor of ours here in New York City. We are learning a lot more about them. We hope to learn a lot more as we go forward with them. And we're very, very happy to have you on board. So Mark, give us a little bit of an education about what you're all about and what you do.
Thank you, Joe.
And thank you once again for coming in as a sponsor.
Thanks, everyone. I know that everybody's trying to get out of here around 2 o'clock, so I'm going to keep this short and sweet today. But it's a great way and a terrific opportunity for us to introduce you to Nuix, so I welcome that. And thank you for having me join you today. So, Nuix has been around for about 12 years. And we originally started out, we are an Australian company headquartered out of Sydney, although I think today there's more people in North America than there are over in Australia. Originally, we were engaged by the U.S. military, or the Australian military. They had a large notes repository, and this goes back to 2003. They had this large notes repository that they wanted to gather and pull information out of. They just didn't have a mechanism, a software package to do that. So the founder of Nuix wrote some code that basically allowed this notes repository to be investigated and pull information out of it. And that's really where Nuix was founded. And that was about 12 years ago. Over the last several years, we've moved from the forensic area, where law enforcement, regulatory, security advisors, folks, those types of folks have been using it. We've gone now into the e-discovery area because in the world of e-discovery, there's a tremendous amount of litigation that was ongoing. You've got the Securities and Exchange Commission asking for information for investigative purposes. You've got plaintiff law firms. You've got the big Enron cases that have transpired. So we moved into the e-discovery field, and how we did that was we kept our core engine, which is an extremely fast and forensically sound processing engine, but we put a new user interface on the application to allow it to be easier for folks to use. So what I'm going to do this afternoon is walk you through a few slides, talk about the history of Nuix, how it's being used today. I'm actually going to start the application up, provide you with an introduction to it, what the user interface looks like, how it operates. And at the end, I'll introduce you to something called Prooffinder. And Prooffinder is something that we launched in the 4th quarter of last year. It's a philanthropic endeavor. And what we've done is we've taken an operational copy of Nuix, it's about 90% functional, and we sell it to people for $100. And the $100 goes to a charity organization called Room to Read. And this is where kids in underdeveloped and developing countries get books and libraries and the likes. And to date, we've raised close to $40,000 from donations, and our objective is to get to 100. So it's a good way to get a copy of Nuix, feel good about spending $100, and quite frankly, it's something that we sell to enterprises and organizations for tens of hundreds of millions of dollars. When you get up into these large enterprise environments. And the copy of Prooffinder is about 90% functional compared to what the stuff is you buy for the enterprise. So on that note, let me move forward. Today we're doing business in 25 countries. We've got over 300 customers. And it's a range of folks, from people at KPMG are using our products. Obviously, Ed this morning, who was with Smart Data, is using our products. So people are using it for the purposes of investigations. Over here in the U.S., the Securities and Exchange Commission uses Nuix on every single delivery of electronic data they receive. So if you are regulated by the Securities and Exchange Commission, they do an investigation, you need to send them back that PST file for that custodian, or the custodians they're looking for. Every single shipment that goes through the Securities and Exchange Commission gets processed in Nuix. We're also working overseas with the Serious Fraud Office, the Shanghai Police Department, and then of course there's a lot of our partners that simply use Nuix to process data and present that information to their customers. What makes Nuix different is it is 10 to 50 times faster than any other thing that came before it. So when we're, 10 years ago in the e-discovery business, you would get 10 or 20 or 30 gigabytes worth of data. But in today's world, it's not unusual to get 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 or 100 or 200 or 300 terabytes of data. And this kind of goes back to the big data challenges that people have spoken about that were uncoding before me today. And we'll talk a little bit about that. But the fact that Nuix can process this information at such a rate of speed allows the investigators, allows the case teams to be able to dig into the information just that much faster. There's kind of a unique convergence going on today between forensics and e-discovery. I'm working with the Mass AG's office on their Medicaid fraud division. And they'll go into a company and they'll, just right on the spot, they'll go in and they'll confiscate, several servers, an exchange server. They may confiscate 20 or 30 desktops. They'll bring all that stuff back to the lab. They may have a couple hundred terabytes of data or 50 or 100 terabytes of data. They've got to be able to get through it quickly, identify, is there Medicaid fraud going on? Is there any personal information held in those hard drives and in that electronic information? Have they been pulling out credit card information? Do they have Social Security information that they shouldn't have? So this is the kind of stuff that we can do very rapidly with Nuix. And literally, we're processing projects today. I've got a project that's ongoing where we've indexed over 350 terabytes worth of data in about 30 business days. And that's unheard of. That would take literally 3 to 6 months before Nuix came along. Scope of data, I think we've talked about NCASE. Anybody, just hands up in the room today, who uses NCASE to do forensics collections? Okay. So one of the neat things about Nuix is we can point our software directly at an E01, and if you did a collection for the entire contents of someone's drive or a server, before you do the restore of the image, I can point to that image and identify the components within inside that image that I want to index first. I don't have to restore the entire image. And that puts you at a time advantage to be able to get to that data quicker. Nuix is very easy to install. I came from a large software company before where we would roll out a solution over 3 or 6 months with a team of 20 guys, and it would literally be time and cost that were very large. I can literally get Nuix installed on my laptop in 10 minutes. I can take my laptop with me. I can point it at a data source. I can index it rapidly. I can go into European countries where the privacy laws are different than what we have here. I can point Nuix at a custodian's information. I can have the custodian sitting on my right, the security office sitting on my left, and we, through working with Nuix, partners like KPMG, do this all the time, can triage the data down so it's just the data that is reflective in the case that you're looking to solve. And then take that information back over to the Americas, potentially where the legal teams start to take a look at it. But because Nuix is portable, it makes it very easy to move it around to do an investigation. And by the way, if I'm looking at an Exchange server, I can take an EDB, which is the backup file. I don't have to identify which of the custodians I'm particularly interested in looking at. I take the EDB file, and then I can go in and identify the custodians whom I want to process first. So it keeps it transparent. The investigator doesn't have to tell the IT department, we need the custodians for Mary and Tom and David and Joseph. Just give me the EDB and I'll do my work, unbeknownst to you. So what are we doing here? We've got a universal indexing platform. We literally support hundreds of different file types, everything from Lotus Notes to EO1s to PST files to all your regular Word, PowerPoint, the kind of files that you run into on a constant basis. We've can get to that information rather quickly, and historically it's been used by lawyers and investigators. In 2011, we picked up a company called Microforensics because for the folks that didn't want to use NCASE to do a collection, which is typically done in a forensically sound manner, they just wanted to do a general collection. And as I've dealt with attorneys and talked with consultants, 75% of the time a forensics collection isn't really necessary. You just want to go in and use their drives, you want to collect some information from them. So we picked up a company called Microforensics, and we've integrated the two products together, the newest products and Microforensics. So now I can walk in, I can point at data sources in a network environment, I can get to SharePoint, I can go to email in the cloud, I can pull that information down, I can identify reporting, and it's sort of a light collections tool that we're using there. So we talk about speed with forensic precision, and I'll just talk about some examples of speed. We can index a terabyte of data on two servers, on a 2x server, which is about a $13,000 or $8,000 piece of hardware. It's not a $100,000 piece of hardware. Again, it's relatively inexpensive. Our head developer came from Fujitsu, the supercomputer side of the business. So for him, it's all about nanoseconds. So it's really important that we get through things rather quickly, and that's what we've always done in that. And this is the case on the bottom I'm talking about. We fully indexed 330 terabytes in 37 days. We directly targeted EMC Centera data. It was coming out of an email archive, which I'll talk a little bit more about. But I can point my software directly at Centera and pull data out at a much rapid and faster rate than I can if I had to go through a software application sitting on the front end of an archive. Once you process your data inside Nuix, we immediately identify some key pieces of information, which I'll refer to as data mapping. We'll identify every single type of file that's in that collection, and by that I'll identify the quantities of that data. We'll also identify where the extension of the file has been changed. So if I was trying to email something around the firewall and I decided I was going to take a document and make it executable or a DLL to try to hide it, I'm going to flag that immediately. If I've got questions,
is it doing?
Hang on.
With that feature, is it actually doing a signature analysis, or just looking at the extension?
We're actually doing it on a binary level, so it is a signature analysis of the file, and that's how we can match it up so that the file doesn't match the extension. That's when we flag. So on the binary level, which also means that we don't have to use a third-party application. I don't need to use Microsoft to open up a PST file, which just slows it down. So that's where we get some of the speed and forensic accountability there. If I've got unrecognized file types, obviously there will be some files invariably that you're not going to process, but we'll show you those immediately right out of the chute. So if you're an attorney and you're going to go for your meet and confer, you can tell opposing party, hey, you know what, of the 47,922 files we did collect and process, there were 222 files that we didn't process. What do you want to do about those? And you can discuss those in the 26th conference. If a file is encrypted or password protected, we'll also identify that immediately as soon as we finish our processing. Once it gets into the workbench of the application, there's a variety of different ways to display the results, which I'll show you when I turn the software on in a moment. And I think Ed may have mentioned this morning, but understanding who's who and who's been talking to whom around a particular subject or idea or concept or search is a really critical piece of information that until you had these visual tools was very difficult to identify. It could be weeks or even months down the road if you're doing a linear review before you would run into that information. And finally, we can show chronology over what period of time those people communicated around a certain matter. We continue to build out a new set of tools on top of the engine, which is called visual analytics, which helps you visually see what's been going on. I'll talk a little bit more about that. But it also is a way, from a defensibility and a standard operating procedure, what we can do is we can automate the process, or a process, so that when you're challenged by a regulator, or when you're challenged by a plaintiff, and they say, well, what exactly do you do? Your answer is, we've developed a standard operating procedure. We don't allow an analyst to deviate from that. We ask them to hit a button, and there's basically a scripting engine on the back end, which runs on Ruby, which will then replicate that same process time after time after time. So it's very forensically defensive. Let me just talk about the underlying architecture of the application. Firstly, it doesn't have a SQL backend. We use something called Apache Derby. Anybody familiar? People familiar with Apache on the backend here? So what it is it's a open source database backend that's highly scalable. There are no limitations that you would find in a relational backend. And we're using something called a Lucene full-text search engine, which is also open source. And we put those together to allow it to be a very scalable application that can go across terabytes and terabytes of data. So on the big data problems, today, as I walk into an organization that has big data problems, a lot of them have tried to spend millions of dollars to solve these things. What we recommend to them is start small. Look at where you have duplicative information across your network. Index that information and get rid of the duplicative information. I'm working with a semiconductor manufacturer right now. They manufacture chips for AMD, Intel, Qualcomm, Broadcom. And God forbid the information from AMD gets in the hands of the people from Intel. So what they do is, on a persistent basis, as far as information security, they take the Intel documents and run those across the entire other corpuses of data inside their organization to make sure there's no data leakage going across. And I'm working with a bank right now where they've got a couple hundred terms that they have to run on a consistent basis to make sure from a compliance perspective. These are the kind of things you can be doing with Nuix, starting out small. We're hosting a webinar in a couple of weeks, which I'll send a link out to, on defensible deletion. When you start to figure what the costs are to store information today, what the costs are to back up information is today, and what the costs are when a discovery request comes in, if you don't have to hold on to that information, by working with outside counsel, by working with IT, and working with a set of tools like Nuix, you can do defensible deletion of this data. And that can save a tremendous amount of money. A bank that I'm working with right now recently announced that they had saved somewhere between $20 and $30 million by doing deletion of data that they didn't need to keep anymore. So there's some big numbers associated with it, even though the cost of storage continues to go down. We brushed on archives a little bit this morning when Ed was speaking. In regulated industries, they are required by compliance to hold on to that information for a period of time. And many of those organizations have archives, such as the Enterprise Vault from Symantec. EMC has a product as well. Well, what happens is you've got to move from version 1 to version 2, every 3 or 4 years in the life cycle. So what we advocate is, before you move your house, move from one house to the other, get rid of the stuff you don't want to move. And by pointing directly at the Centera, which is typically the read once, write many, sorry, the other way around, write once, read many, the worm technology, quote-unquote worm technology, it's being able to target that information allows me to get it out of the archive faster before you put it into the new archive. I took a bank from 18 months down to 6 months by putting Nuix in the middle to extract information. So, in the interest of time, what I'm going to do is the information from Prooffinder can be found at prooffinder.com. Again, it's $100 to buy a copy of it, and it's 90% functional. What it doesn't do is it doesn't allow me to go into a source of data and selectively pull out components one at a time, as I can do with the enterprise version. And it limits the case volume to 15 gigabytes. It doesn't limit the number of cases you can run with Nuix, but each case has to be less than 15 gigs. But it's a perfectly functional working copy of Nuix. And if you have any interest, and you feel good about giving up $100. So it's kind of a win-win situation. Let me move over to the application for a moment. Make my screen better.
15 gigs, what was the other limitation?
It doesn't have the ability to pre-filter. I can't go in to an EDB file and just pull up the custodian, McGarvey, and Jones and Smith. I would have to just have the data sources have to be less than 15.
One question?
I just have a quick question in regards to funding. I work for a federal agency, and I know we're looking for the least cost to our agency. Is this something that we would self-teach ourselves with the Prooffinder, or is there a form of training that we can attend?
If you're buying Prooffinder, there's web-based training that's available. In the federal sector, the Internal Revenue Service uses us for the criminal investigations. The DOJ uses us. So I'm happy to introduce my counterpart in DC to you, and you can follow if you like. So this is what the workbench looks like, and it goes basically from detail, or from high level to more detail. So what I've got here on my left-hand side of the screen in my evidence folder is I've got that collection of new example data that I have in front of the case. And I'm a little bit of a resolution challenge here, but basically what I've got here is I've got all my custodians. And I went out and collected from Andrea Ring and Johnson. That's an NSF file, by the way, by the extension right there. And Carol St. Clair, there's my image file, which is my EO1. And I can go into my EO1, identify which custodian we're looking for here. So this is my corpus of data that I'm looking for here. And if I select this button up here, then I, pardon me, if I go this again. So if I go here now, I've got 41,000 items. But if I deselect this and say I want to start my investigation with simply Larry May, I'm not back to 6,500 items. So I can go in and look at a custodian on a case-by-case basis, or I can look at all custodians. It's basically, this is the sandbox that I'm playing in. So what I'll do right now is I will take all custodians and just move this in. So a couple things that we do. Firstly, the National Institutes of Technology, which is referred to as the NIST list, I can run that NIST list against my corpus of data to get rid of my system files automatically. That would be one of the things I'd like to do. I can do neat things like skin tone images. So if I'm looking for pornography in someone's hard drive, and that is the basis of the case I'm looking for, we rank the content based upon the severity of it. Now, I've scrubbed this content, obviously, so I can see anything that would be inappropriate. But trust me, this was the Enron stuff, and before we did that, you can only imagine what was on here. But that being said, if I go in and I click I, and I display my results by a thumbnail, I've got images here on the screen. And I've got 44 images. I do have some duplicative images in here. And what I can do is at any point I can go in and I can deduplicate by my MD5, which takes my 44 down to 16 items, and I get 16 unique items. Well, maybe this is where I want to start my investigation. So I will tag those. I could add a tag to that, and this is just kind of doing some on-the-fly categorization at a high level to sort out what the differences are. So I can tag those and categorize those. I'm looking at inappropriate content right now, but let's look at some other ways that we can look at the data. Well, firstly, I can generate a word list. This may be particularly interesting in the litigation case where you've got to meet with the opposing party to start discussing terms that you want to negotiate. Well, understanding that I would probably want to stay away from the word Enron because it would provide me with 14,000 documents that would be responsive, hey, I'm going to stay away from that. If I have a filter here and I want to start putting some of my words in, such as energy, it'll show me all the versions of energy that are inside. I can export this list out and provide it to counsel and say, of the collection of data, here's all the words that are in it. In the same way, I could show counsel what the entities are that we're in discussion with. So I'm particularly interested in Dynegy, so I want to hone in on Dynegy. I can also go in and show my PII, pardon me for acronyms. This is personal identifiable information. Credit card numbers, social security numbers, personal ID numbers. These are all working off the idea of something called regular expressions. Is that a new term for some of the folks in the audience? Okay, for those who it is, it's a sequence of numbers or formats. And basically what you do to the software is you say, I'm looking for something that is 3-2-4 and show me all the records in the collection that are like that. So if it's part numbers, if it's account numbers, if it's patent numbers, you can automatically dig into that stuff very rapidly. So you're looking for information leakage. I'm an engineer that just left a company, and I want to find out all the designs that I took with me on the way out. Well, perhaps I go and I start by the ones, the extensions of files that were renamed so I could get them around the firewall. Then I want to figure out, is there anybody else collaborating? So let's go back to the skin tone images for a moment. We've got 44. I took it down to 16. I want to take a look at those two images, shown by thumbnails. What I want to do is I would like to see, let's see if I can show these on the network map. So these are all the custodians now that have been involved in that content going back and forth. And I can hone in on Andrea Ring and Craig, and I can actually show it on a chronology to see what's happened here. And again, apologies on the resolution, guys, because when it's a little smaller, you can see over time how it was sent back and forth between people, and as I hover over it, it actually will show up in the right-hand pane here. So if I've got an HR investigation, somebody's been accused of sending inappropriate content around the organization, I can immediately find that content on their drive. I can show who they've distributed it around to, And you know what, in some of these situations, I may identify the custodians who I originally didn't collect for, and I may go and grab their drives and grab their information as well. So just a quick example on that, how we can go ahead and pull that information. I know that we are running out of time, so my intention today was just to provide you with an introduction to Nuix, show you what the user interface looks like, talk about some of the use cases that we've got here, introduce you to Prooffinder. But let me just pause and see if there's any questions, and I appreciate that folks phone
Yeah,
calling.
sure. Hang on. As far as the searches go, it does do wildcard searches, grab or anything like that?
It does wildcard searches, it does full Boolean searches. It currently is not a central search engine. We're building that framework into the application in the next release. So probably within 3 months we'll have that environment. But it absolutely does support wildcards, Booleans, proximity searches. Everything that you can get on DT search. We have full support for DT search type syntax and do it that way. And that's something we just added.
Mark, thank you.
Last but not least, thank you very much for your time today.
All right, we're hopefully going to hear more about this as Mark and I go forward. We're going to try and get them on IGTV and on the Thursday conference call so people can kind of learn a little bit more about each of this. Before everybody starts putting away their stuff and gets distracted, come on over, you don't be bashful. All right, and I want you over here. The reason being is Michael is going to be with me for a while again. All right, you are a sophomore at St. John's?
Yes.
And what are you majoring?
Computer security, cyber forensics.
You are?
Nick, I'm a senior, and I'm also studying the same thing at St. John's University. Computer security with a cyber forensics concentration.
I'm Tommy, I'm a senior at St. John's University, studying cyber forensics and computer security.
I'm Katie, studying at St. John's University, and I'm doing computer security as well.
All right, the reason I brought them up here is because we want these kids to get as much exposure as possible into the industry. All right, we want them to become familiar with who you are. They are going to be entering the workplace like many of you did years ago. All right, looking to make connections, looking to network, and looking to do a lot of different things. There's a lot of different people here from public agencies as well as private companies. All right, give these kids a hand, all right, because they're your followers. Okay. We're working on a POS system, as I mentioned earlier today, all right, and as we become more familiar with what they've discovered, we'll let everybody know. All right, we want to thank everybody for attending the InfraGuard presentation today, especially Dennis, and where's Darren over here, all right, with HTCIA. And if they're still online, thank you folks for being online with us as well. We certainly do appreciate that. I think we had somewhere between 20 and 25 people online at any particular point in time today. It's all very cool stuff, all right? We take everybody from where they can come from, right? Some people it's online, like with IGTV. Other people, they can attend the monthly security summits. Other people, the Thursday conference call, and on and on and on we go, all right? Other than that, does anybody have any kind of questions about today or anything that they've learned so far? Bill?
I'd just like to remind everybody that nominations are closing today for the offices, the elected offices of New York Metro InfraGuard, including President, Vice President, Secretary, and Treasurer. If you have any interest in those nominations, whether it be to nominate another member of InfraGuard, a secure member, or yourself, if you are a secure member, please go to our website. The instructions are there. The nominations may be made either in person or by email from your secure email account. They will be closing. Nominations will be closing tonight. So as the only member of the nominating committee present, I think, ex officio, let me just ask right now, are there any nominations from the floor for any position that I mentioned? Just raise your hand. Any other nominations that will be made right now? Okay, and which positions would you like to nominate for?
I'd like to nominate myself for VP.
Vice President? Okay.
Okay.
And can you state your full name?
Edward Andron.
Edward Andron. Okay. And we will record that and...
Okay, Phil, see Ed at the end of the meeting, and if you can, get him over to the LinkedIn site. All right, and that way we can put Ed into nomination. Thanks, Ed. Anybody else? That's kind of like official, InfraGard business that we've got to do every 2 years. All right. There's something wrong. Anybody else? Any other questions? Any other observations? No? We hope you enjoyed yourselves today. Get home safely, and thank you for attending. We'll see you next month when we start talking about organized retail theft. All right, should be a very, very interesting meeting. Look for stuff to come start populating up on our website. Let's see, today's Wednesday. Certainly by Friday this week. Get home safe, everybody. And I've got a book up here. Mark, was this you? Where is Mark? Is this you? Yeah, okay. All right, everybody, get home safe.
Excellent meeting, Joe. Excellent.
Thank you.
Good dynamics.
I'm really interested in joining it.
Yeah, sure. Let me...